All right, guys, welcome back. I'm going to do another demo here for you off of a student thumbnail that was done here. So this is a really great piece. Kelsey was working on this. Came out really nice. Here's really nice arrangement of composition, shapes, foreground elements, midground, background. So when we just take a look at this, I really like what she has here in the foreground. I might add a little bit to it because I like working a little bit on a panoramic scale. That's just my personal preference, but she has a lot of things that are really developing nicely here. These shapes are really cool that overlap, and then it recede back, and we go into this sort of church setting in the background here. But there's a couple little things that I would add to it. One of them that I noticed is when I look up here at the sky, she has this sort of curving sky, but part of me might want to get in there and have some clouds that are sort of in that circular format that she's indicating right in here. That might really bring it alive. Also, I don't have any real sense right now of light, so I can't tell if light's coming from the left or from the right. I don't have any facades that are being hit, so I can go in there and I could address that. That might be a second thing. A third thing too is I might come over here, and when I'm looking at, there's like a couple shadow shapes in here, like right here in the foreground. I don't know exactly what this shadow shape is doing, and when I'm looking at this, there's some weird, looks like a sign or something right here. I might take that out and sort of paint over that. And I'll just try to keep this all in sort of separate layers and develop it. And I might pause this a little bit in between because in the last demo we were at an hour. It took forever to render. So I might try to keep this around a 35 or 40-minute demo and just adding to it. So again, my goal is to add to this, bring it to a higher level. I'm going to do that by picking a light source direction, okay, establishing some of the other finer details like the clouds, details on the ground, perhaps some shadows, and then also expanding some texture into the piece, fixing a couple spots back here that get a little darker and lighter, like the top of this hill back here when this one's a little bit lighter. So I just want to make sure some of those adjustments are working correctly for the atmospheric perspective. See, that's a lot lighter here, lighter, and then if I click this one, it's a little bit darker. So that one should be a little bit lighter. So I got a couple little adjustments to do in there. Okay? All right, so I'm just going to be quiet for a minute here so I can just start working and getting into the piece and figuring out exactly where I want to be. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to expand to this. So let me make sure I got my layers set up here. I'm going to start here on the sort of mid-ground here. So I'm going to start with 3 layers on top. I'm going to label them mid-ground and then a foreground, okay? I don't know why, but my mouse is acting up. All right. So with my mid-ground here, I just want to keep this. I like the flow that she has in here. Okay, so I want to keep some of that going. I'm going to delete some brushes in here too. 1 second. Let's go to, let me pause the recorder. Another instructor is using the station. There's brushes on here that I don't use. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's expand this back out. Let's come back in here. Let's get my list. There we go. What's going on here? Where's my brush? There it goes. And why is my brush not working here? There it is, okay. Alright. Okay, I'm back. I had a little issue there. My layer accidentally went to a color setting up here. I have no idea why, and I couldn't get, every time I was trying to paint on it with black, I couldn't get any values to show up there that I wanted. Okay, so here, let me just finish. I wanted to sort of bring this into the foreground here. Okay, I'm just extending her canvas, trying to keep some of that. She has that cool sort of graphic technique that's happening there, and I like that. Okay, and then she also had this large sort of foreground shape here on both sides. So I want to continue that over, just to expand into the composition just a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to take this here. So something that I like to do, just a really cool approach if you'd like to try this whenever I'm working, is I might select like a branch area like this, and then I throw down a base value and then put texture on top of it. That way it doesn't look so empty. So a base value for this shape right now, I might grab a value like about right here. Kelsey, good eyes on that. I'm not quite functioning at 100% today, so I appreciate your help on that. So see, I threw some black on there. So now if I wanted to get some texture on there, I can go, I gave you guys a bunch of these brushes, right? So I could come over here, I have this one brush that's called Heavy Texture, and if I lighten up to a little bit more of a gray, and go down to like 20, and see, just sort of go across like this, it puts these little scratchy bits of texture that make it look like that could be some type of a real branch structure. It's not just completely black in silhouette. And there's a whole bunch of different variations. I gave you guys all these brushes. There's thick texture. I even have this one here that does spots. Okay, let me show you a little bit more. It's a great way to work. You can quickly come in to something. Do you see that? Okay, and if I make my brush a little bit smaller there, see, and if I just put a little bit, see, it looks like little leaf particles on that front. It's a great way to add a little bit of detail very quickly. So all I did there is just sort of, put a base value, went back on top of it with a texture, and it develops it. And then Kelsey also had this shape here. If I turn what I'm adding on there, she had this really cool sort of like tree stump looking shape here. I might just paint some more of that in right in here. Okay, let's get rid of some of that. And same thing here. Let's come in with my brush. Let's see if I can just add this with a straight detail. Okay. There, just get some little something there to add a little bit of texture so it doesn't look so empty. There, I could develop that a little bit later. Okay, now let's come back in here, and it looks like there's like a pathway or a stream or something coming through here, and I have this hard shadow in here, so I definitely want to paint that out because I don't know what that is about right now. I want to just adjust that. It's too dark. Just get rid of it, because that doesn't really make sense to part of the piece and what's happening when I'm looking at it. That thing's really dark in there. It just kills the... Just trying to match that sort of graphic outline that she has. Okay, there we go. So we got rid of that. Let me get rid of this guy right here. Yeah, I don't know what those shapes were, but I feel like they're really, my eye was starting to look at them a little bit, and they're not really doing anything for the composition. So I'm just going to get rid of them. Okay. There. So that guy's gone there. And I think what I might do, one of the things I wanted to develop, I also want to adjust this rock back here. I'm going to do that really just by selecting it right now. So let me see if I can copy and paste that on top of itself. So I like to show you the before and after of what I'm working on or how I'm trying to think. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, paste it. I want to lighten it up. I want it to go lighter as things recede back there. And I still have another version of it here. I'm going to drop it in the back and even make a lighter mountain range in there. So let me erase a little bit of that edge on there. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take that, drop it underneath. Okay, and make it lighter. There we go. So I want this to just be a little bit darker as it transitions over there. And there's just like that weird top on there. I'm going to fix that too. I don't know why that's sort of in there. Dark to light, dark to light. Don't go dark, medium, and then back and forth. Keep that dark to light in there. So there, I got that structure in there. I just put a little mountain in the back there, just to have a little bit more atmospheric perspective. And let me fix the one in the front here. Let's merge all these together so they're on one. So I'm just going to paint over this with a little bit of the sky and get rid of that. Okay. All right. So I like this. She has like this sort of cool pathway happening here in the front. So I'm going to put, I love pathways and trails. Bless you. With pathways and trails, it really allows me to see the direction of what's happening. And since I really opened up this canvas, it actually allows me to create a staging point in the left-hand side of the screen here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take some of this white that Kelsey gave me, and I'm just going to quickly look. I'm going to select some of the ground. I'm going to try to mimic what's happening on part of that ground right there. Okay, and if you want to, you can even do this. Look, I can imagining this ground is going like this. It's sort of coming in through here, just the way that she sort of has it, like that. And then I'm going to imagine this sort of wind down, and she already has like a little trail here. See, there's like a little trail that comes in right there. It's pretty cool. I like that, and I might even find a way to get this. I might put something in here a little bit later, a tree or something. I'm imagining part of this trail coming through right in here by the tree, and then maybe even sort of wrapping around right here, and then we see it sort of right through here like this. Okay, that's a great way to wind the eye around. Now that I have that, and again, you know, just use your, just going to take my lasso, deselect around this tree area right here. There it goes. Oops, missed that little part there. Okay, and now I'm just going to hit H. I'm going to come in with my brush, and then I have it sort of at this like light gray here, and I'm just going to sort of put some strokes across there. What I like about doing this is that I have my brush set at it's at 100%, but it's at a light gray. So when I stroke on top of it, it'll get a little bit wider and wider. So that allows me to control some of the value changes that are happening in that path. So there, now if I bring that pathway a little bit more into the foreground, and then it's sort of instantaneous. I can just paint over on top here, and I can develop that. I can make that path a little bit brighter towards there when it wraps around here. Okay. Erase some of that. That's right there. And the rest I like to sort of just do manually. I like to get in there, figure out what I'm looking at. Again, I went thick to small. Okay, so now I have much more of a distinct pathway that's heading through there. And I think I'm going to pick a light direction coming from the left right here. So I like that thought of light coming down and hitting the side of the tree and all the stuff in the foreground here. So what I'm going to do is just take this as another layer here and start coming in. Now I could adjust it myself. It'd be a little bit easier if I had the original, but since I'm painting on top of this, I'm just going to do it on a separate layer. So I'm just going to come in here like this. I'm going to try to grab some little highlights on some of these buildings here and see if I can get these to develop nicely here. Oops. Actually, I learned some of this back in the day from, I had a great instructor here, Mr. Egan, and we used to do this on the figure all the time. We would just like scribble out these highlights, and you'd be amazed how coming in and putting those highlights there start to create form and get objects to turn. So I'm just, again, placing some little scribbles for where light might be hitting parts of these areas here. Maybe there's a little bit of something getting hit here. Keep that separate. Okay, just like that. Now that I have that selected, let's get this corner here. Okay, just something like that. Let's say right here. And I'm going to hide those right now. I'm going to come back to my brush, and I'm just going to grab, go up to my value bar here, and I'm grab like a 20 or 30% white. And I'm just going to go down about 10%. And light's coming from the left, right? So I want this to sort of come across and hit at the right. I don't want to over paint, especially what's in the background. I don't want the highlight to be too strong. So I'm just going to try to hit little corners here and get that to pop out a little bit so I can see a little bit of a change happening in part of the facade. Okay. So by doing this, this really is going to help me indicate direction of light. Okay, let me deselect, and I missed an edge there, so I'm just going to paint it in manually. So Sometimes if you see or feel where else that light might be hitting, just paint it in a little bit, you know. All right, there we go. Starting to nitpick with that a little bit too much. In the same accord that I did that now, I can also think of if I have a light side, it means I can have a darker side, so I can select a couple little parts here and I could add a little bit of a shadow. So again, these little milk and cranny differences sometimes can be where the eye tends to look at and go. So I'm just going to select some little areas in here. It might be some of my shadow spots. Okay. Just very subtle. And they're not going to be really like super dark shadows or anything at all. Just a little bit of gradient or something on there. So let me hit H. Let's go to brush. I could even keep it down to about 20%, a little bit lighter. Just paint a little bit darker on that end, a little bit there. Don't want to go too dark, and I can push that back down. Again, I'm going to go back over this in a little bit. So I'm just tapping a couple ends to get those little shadow sides to pop out there just a little bit. Keep my interest sort of focused in over here. Okay. I'm going to go in there and throw some clouds in, swirling around. All right, let me pause the recorder for a minute, and I'll be right back. Just save it. All right, I just decided just to merge all the layers together to make them into one. Let's come in here, let's throw some clouds up here, and then I can soften this up. So with my light coming in on that side, I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat here. I'll show it to you. I have a couple brushes that I found that can do this really easy for me, and they're a lot of fun. They have some light rays in them. So there's a belief a lot of painters have is that by using light rays they're actually cheating, in a sense that you don't need to have all the rays casting down, that you should be able to paint the highlights of light coming down and affecting the form, and by the eye visually looking at the form you can tell what's being affected or not affected, right? So I think that's a really good approach and a good thought. So you don't want to be too dependent on light rays. You can't stamp in light rays forever. Hold on a second. I'm trying to figure out what happened to my brush here. Another Instructor was here, and I'm missing stuff. There we go. Okay, so what's really cool is I can do this really fast, because look, I just have this layer right here. So I can just come over real quick with white. I mean, this is a great thing about using brushes very quickly. Here I have this on a brand new layer. Watch what happens if I do this right here. Bam. See that? I instantly have some type of atmosphere coming into the picture real quick. And then what's cool is I can even shrink these rays down a little bit like this. And I'm only at 10% opacity. Let's say if I go to like 30, and if I come over and put a couple here, see that? How that quickly goes in there, and it just adds a little bit of, okay? And then what I like to do is once I get that in there, now I have a direction of light. I can have more shadows. I can mess with it a little bit more. I'm going to have this as being like maybe a parallel time of day. And I can adjust even the opacity setting of the brush. So now I just really stamp a little bit in there, and there's not nearly as much. Now what's cool is I can go in here, and if it's a little too bright for me, this is where I can smudge it down, and then I could erase a little bit. So right now it's a little too strong, but I could easily have done the light rays just by holding a brush at 10% and just holding shift and drawing them straight down. I could have done that, and then I could just turn the angle of the layer, and then I could get them in a line, and then it's about subtraction from there. So how I would subtract from this right now is, well, there's a couple things. First, I want to smudge them a little bit because I don't want too hard of lines in there. So to smudge them, remember I gave you guys the smudge brushes. I'm going to come down here to smudge. I'm going to make sure got Mr. Nice on. Okay, put it at 10%. And I'm just going to sort of lightly come across here and go over some of those lines. You see that? And I'm not erasing right now. It's just smudging. It's just lightly in the right area or two. You see that? I'm just very lightly sort of going across. It's killing some of the hard lines that were in there. Okay, because when you look at light's not just a series of hard lines that are straight. That's how Photoshop makes it. But now I'm just lightly going over, and it just allows me to softly sort of fade off a couple of those lines. But I can still keep some of the atmosphere that was in the piece as well. Okay, here, so just even smudging, I almost don't even have to go in and erase as much. Here it was a little bright, so I'm going to see if I can take that down just a little bit right there. I sort of like that though because it's a nice area of contrast. Let me come in with my eraser, and I'm going to erase what's on top of this foreground element right here. Okay. There we go. All right, so now I'm looking over here. I like that blend. That's a little too strong for me. So I'm going to come back over. Let's go to smudge. And keep thinking I'm at home because I keep using a hotkey that doesn't work here. So I'm just smudging that out a little bit more, just like that, okay? So I have some indication of light now sort of coming across there that's working for me. All right, so I can turn it on and off. And then if I want to erase, I would come back and use just a really nice soft eraser. And that soft brush works really fantastic where I can just come in here and lightly just sort of drag it across. And it really lightly erases some of the areas that I want to be, you know, focusing on. Okay, all right, with that done, let me come over here. I want to put some clouds up here and around that location and try to create a little bit more mood, a little bit more atmosphere. So let me switch over. Let me come down here. Let me grab a cloud brush. I got a couple new ones the other day, and I wanted to try some of these out. That's Canopy Cloud. This one works pretty good. Let's try the Stratus brush and see what happens. Okay, and again, some of this is trial and error. I have a couple of different cloud brushes. Some work better than the others. Some of them, the opacity have to be at a certain setting, you know. So here, I'm just going to sort of see if I can come in here. I want to try to get clouds swirling around a little bit the way that Kelsey had them in here. So I'm going to see, I might come back on top of this and then paint underneath this gray so the clouds, you know, pop out a little bit more. There's these sort of weird strips there. It's more of a graphic choice, so let me see what I can paint on top. Okay. Because clouds do have the darker shadow area underneath them. Just curious, since I have this on another layer, I wonder if I get under here and I put a little bit of a darker value to blend that in a little. Get the clouds to pop out just a little bit more under there. I want to go too dark though. And some of that's because of if I turn this off and I come back in here, she has those really dark stripes in the sky. So I need to decide if that's a stylistic choice on her part and she wants these really, you know, dark stripes. I might go in there and just adjust those a little bit. Personally, as I'm looking at this, I find them to be just a little strong. So let me come in here to the piece, and I said I would paint over this. So let me do it on this layer right here. See if I can just sort of brush it quickly. Fade these down a little bit. Just might have to use something else. 1 second. this fade out there. A little too, and I do like my skies to have a little bit of natural sort of gradation in them. Sort of dark to white. Let me see if I can just go back over this a little bit more. And just having that little bit of haze like that when I turn on my clouds, see, it's going to get them just to pop a little bit. But I'm going to take off the dark underneath part. It was too dark now. There's got a little bit more clouds in there just to get a little bit more of the atmosphere. And then when I turn on the light, I'm going to label that light. Since it's on a separate layer right now, I can just adjust it a little bit. I want to get it to sort of drop in there, but it's coming down here a little bit too much. I want that focus to stay there. So I'm going to go back to my eraser, and I'm just going to sort of erase this end that's right in here, just like that. Keep part of that focus on the town right there. So then when I drop down to much smaller, I can see where I want my eyes to look. I have some nice highlights in some areas in here that are focusing. Okay, got a couple clouds in there, and let's just real quick, I'm just going to drop a little bit of white mist on top of that, maybe some clouds in there. And then I was thinking about maybe adding just a couple stylized stones right in here in sort of the midground to get that to define a little bit. Okay, so let me finish up here. Let me just label these clouds. Okay, and in this particular sample, there's some really hard edges there in the back, and I don't want all those hard edges just like overwhelmed, so I'm just going to come back right now and sort of take this light gray. I'm going to sort of just paint over some of this castle top, get that really to fade back just a little bit more. Creates a little bit more atmosphere inside the piece, doesn't make it as dominating with all those. Sort of blends it all together very nicely. So you're not going to have a lot of those hard edges in the back there because it's further back, right? Don't want to go too much, but putting a little bit of shadows in there too, get some of that to pop. And every now and then I like to do this thing with the ground. I like to just have a little bit darker shadows on the ground that sort of come up towards the top. Then I could still fade some of this back into the sky. You can still see it. We know it's there. Just get it to drop back a little bit more. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to stop the recorder real quick and just take a break for a second, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. I just saved the file real quick. So I was just taking a look at what I had here, and I realized looking at my light, I want that light to look like it's coming from behind. So when I'm turning that light off and on, you see the rays? The rays are still coming into my foreground here, and they're still coming over this mountain right here. So I'm going to go back with my eraser real quick here, go to about 50%. And I want to really get rid of those light rays that are on top of that mountain right now, like this. There, dull these down a little bit, get rid of that, and then really I have 100%. Now I'm just going to come in here and just hit all along here. Make sure I have no more overcast right there. Okay. There we go. Sort of like the light being behind some of this too. That's the cool thing about using your light like that on a separate layer is you can sort of determine by subtracting it what facades it's sort of hitting. So if I erase a little bit of the rays in here, it'll make it look like the light's sort of behind that subject matter in terms of its perspective. Okay. All right, cool. And let me turn that down just a little bit there, like so. So the only other, I like the clouds in there. I think the only other thing I'd like to do is eventually maybe, and that's up to Kelsey, she can get a character in there that's walking over there. But I'd like to define a little bit more of the midground here, maybe have some rocks or other structures there, you know, that might be working together. So let's just take a look at what I have here right now. There's a couple ways. If I had to make those really quick and I was doing like a if I only had like 20 minutes or something, or 10 minutes, what I can do is just come back to the original and copy and paste, and then just adjust with the tool, because she has some cool rocks that are sort of already in here. If you look at this pattern right here, if I just copy and paste that, right, and oops, copy, paste, there it goes. And if I just bring that over there, see, that's already like a rock shape. If I just drag that up above here, and I can just put it down here, and I can just transform. Okay, and I can transform it again. See, and I have like a nice little detailed element there that can just, I can quickly create some rocks or a pattern, or put some other bits of detail in there. So I might even just take some of that. Just take that guy, put him over here, turn him a little bit to his side. Let me paste again, bring in another one. This time I might just erase a little bit. This is, to me, what's really important about this is really how you work a lot faster. I mean, if you only have a certain amount of time, use Photoshop and its tools. Right? Look, I'm going to rotate that. Oops. I'm going to flip it. I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to transform it, turn it like this. See, I just made a whole nother rock right there. Okay, see that? And out of the same rock that was I pasted before. Drag that behind there. Transform this. Bring it up a little bit more. And what's cool is I'm going to label these now. I know where they are. They're 14, 15. Because then I could actually go in and darken them along the path, going from dark to lighter as they go across. So I know 14 was the first one, right? So now I hit Command Paste again. Let's, oops, I'm going to transform this guy too. Let's turn him like this. Here, I'm just going to select this area here. I'm just going to delete that. Deselect V. I got sort of another rock I can throw in there. Okay. So, and now this is what's fun, is that here, let me duplicate 14. You're like, what is he doing? Just check it out, watch. If I put that here in the foreground, I might transform them, put them in right there. Now if I go to levels, I darken them up. See, I got a cool little rock shape right there in the foreground now that I threw in there really quickly. And then I could come back over here as I go 14, 15, 16 and go along this pathway, right? Let me go to 14 right now. See, I'm going to darken that rock a little bit more. Okay, and then 15 is going to get a little bit lighter. Okay, like so. And then I'll make 16 even lighter. So you see that? Just those three rocks going along like that really do a lot for me to add. I'm dark, a little bit lighter, and I'm going to add another one or two over here along part of the trail. And then I'll come in and I'll throw a little bit of texture on the side of those to get those to pop a little bit. So look, I just duplicated that layer there. Let's just paste a couple more. You never know what you might come up with. Let me take this guy here in the foreground. Let's make him sort of large like he's. Okay, I'm going to right click in here. Let's go to distort. Grab one corner, bring it down here, bring another one this way. See, look at that. I copy and paste the same rock, and I'm creating something that's totally different every time. Just use copy and paste. It's there for your, you know. Right click in there, distort, grab that in. Maybe I might have it really stretch out a little bit, and it could come to a point, pointing me back towards part of my composition like this. Okay. All right, just look at that. Just filled up part of this whole foreground, and especially going dark to lighter. Okay. So if I take a look at what I have here, look at that, just a couple copy and paste, and I have something cool in my foreground that fills that up. And so if I think of transferring scale, and I think of working from larger to smaller, so as I get back here, I keep making some rocks smaller and smaller. That's going to be a huge advantage for me. I'm going to duplicate this layer right here. Okay, I'm going to bring it back in here. I'm going to go ahead and transform this, and I'm going to lighten it up, put it somewhere in about there, horizontally. Okay, let's go to levels. some other little shadow in there. Just get rid of it quick. And even though it doesn't quite look just like the other one, I just select some of these rocks and I'm just going to move them like this. This is the move tool. Put a little space on that guy there, move that one down, deselect, come in here, take this guy, move him over a little bit more like this. Okay, just to create some rocks, you know, just lighter, going larger to smaller, just in the background, get them along that edge of that trail. Okay, just like that. And then if I want to expedite, let me just come in here. I might just select a couple areas along parts of that trail and try to define it a little bit more. A couple of areas to pop out, just like that. Because now when it gets further back there, I'm just going to be seeing part of the silhouette shape, right? So H, let's go to brush, a little bit darker value, and say I'm just going to come in here really lightly. See, and now just painting that in there, it's just giving the rock illusion. Okay, really quick. All right, so that develops a little bit more of the path going over there. And let's take everything we have and maybe we should, let me merge it except for, let's take all this together. Okay. In the foreground here, I still don't have, I could put just a little bit of a texture coming over on the top of this to indicate there's a change. If light's coming this way, some light's going to bounce back and hit some of the subject matter. So what I can just do is really quick come in here with my lasso like this. I can select some parts just like this. Maybe that's top of a rock there. Okay. And then, oops. Okay, and then I'm going to come over here as well, and let's just add a little, maybe something wraps over there a little bit like that. Okay, something goes this way too. And then again, what I was doing earlier that I really like is if you have a base value, if you hit it with a texture, that does a lot to get the eye to extrapolate what's happening in terms of the shape and the form there. So if I just come across here like this, and really light, my brush is set at 20% right now, and I have a pretty good texture pattern that I can just stamp on some of this. So you see that stamping on here really lightly, and just by stamping some of that across like this, it just makes it look like it's a tree with some type of a shape or value that's going on it there. And you can use, don't use just one brush, use a couple. So I use that one there, that's defining that, and then I might come back and go to something. It's just redoing my brushes. I had some good ground rock. Let's see what ground rock does on that tree. So it might be pretty cool too. Pull that out a little. You put a little bit more ground rock down there on the ground. So you see how that just brought out that foreground instantly right there? Just by hitting that with a little bit of that texture. It really gets that, separates the foreground from the tree. Then I might come in here just really soft and just sort of 10%, just put a little bit of haze coming down on that right here. Just defines that a little bit. I'm going to hit deselect now, come in, and then just lightly paint a little bit of reflective light maybe coming around the back here, just really lightly. So let's just grab, this foggy brush here, this cloud brush. Sort of imagining some clouds in here, just really light. See, I just put that right across the back. A little bit of reflective light coming in there maybe. Maybe a little bit back there. And I didn't put any texture on here, so I can just do that very quick. Okay, let's go to brush here. Let's grab a different texture for that. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, this is cool. I've used this before. This actually does ground really nice. I can do some really neat looking texture spots for trees too. If it does too much in one area, like that, what I can do is then just come back with my eraser and then erase some of this, like a 50% grade right now. Like I'm just going to lightly erase to get some of those little highs in there. It's just turning the form. See, it does something to turn the form just a little bit more, so it's not so black and dominant, and it matches the light coming through there too. Okay, deselect and come back with my brush, and oops, sorry about that. I'm trying to work as fast as I can here. Put a little bit softer value coming through. I'm going to have some highlights on this rock here. So you see that this is being overlapped. That shape is overlapping this shape. So if I just select this right now and make it look like there's like a little highlight in here, maybe in here too, just like that, and maybe just come across here just a little bit, little highlights from that light source, just like that. Maybe a little guy here, like that. Hit H. Wait, maybe another one. Problem is, I know when to stop, right? Hit H, and now I'm going to come back with my brush and just sort of lightly hit those little areas here. Remember where your selections are. So maybe that's why I'm only at 10%. Just very lightly. See that little edge right there that I just put in there? That just does a lot to get that, just hitting that little light right there. See that really lightly? It just makes the light come across and come up over that edge and that facade. Gets it to read just a little bit easier. Okay. That's it. So there, now I have part of that defined. I like how that's looking. And if I wanted to still, I could come over, and if I want to create a little bit more depth in the foreground here, I can. She did a good job putting those branches in there, but now I could. What else is associated with branches and trees? Is I might have leaves, I might have vines, I might have some other little elements that can add in anything that makes it really interesting to the human eye. So let me try that. I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to put another layer on top, and then we'll take a look at what it looks like. And real quick, I have not saved, so let me save this scene real quick. Thumbnails. Call these student paintovers. All right, there we go. Now I have it saved. Don't have to worry about it crashing or anything. Okay, and let's come in here. Let me take a look at my brush. I'm gonna go back down to some plants that I have, some leaves and stuff. Love the leaves. Leaves are really cool because they just add these little details that you would see, you know. So let's see if I come over here. This is pretty black in here. I'm just curious if I lightened up some gray. So I want to just come along with the leaf tool and see what would happen if I hit a couple little areas. There, I just threw a couple leaves down on the ground, nothing fancy. And then let me see what happens if I take some of these leaves here, put a couple up here maybe. There's a couple just floating around there, maybe a couple over here. Just dirties up the ground, doesn't make it so pristine. Okay, that's my ground rock. That's not what I wanted. Let's go back to leaves. Just a couple of variations of them. I'm going to go back. I was getting too close to that structure there. Oops. Just want to get a couple on the end there fading off a little bit, let's say. Okay. And, oh yeah, if I have these big leaves, I forgot about these. Sometimes you have to use your mouse. So your mouse will get the full stamp of them in there. The sensitivity of the Wacom will not. So if I come in here like this, use the mouse, and I always forget that for some reason. Look, boom, see, and I hit those in there, that really gets that to pop out right in there, versus if I do it with my brush, it doesn't quite give me that same, okay? So Let's see what else I have. I thought I had another weed. Now I'm trying to make it into a giant jungle. But just these little things can add, just little details. I can add a little bit more. If I have, again, I have that trail walking down in there that I added. So if I just overlap a little bit of a stamp, boom, like that in front, it just creates a little bit more depth into the piece. Okay. There. Okay, nothing too fancy. All right. So let's just real quick, let's take a look at where we started and where we ended up. So I defined a little bit more of the light source. I put some clouds in there. Oh yeah, the last thing I wanted to do, I wanted to put some haze. I want to make it a little hazy because I like that mood with the light coming through and hitting some of that. So maybe when I think of water and trees and rocks, I think of forest and like some, you know, little bit of mood floating around in there. So what I'm going to do on one more layer real quick here, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take a brush and I want to get some like fog sort of floating around. So for fog, I think what you can really use, you know, you can take just a cloud brush if you have good clouds and just sort of streak it across. But I've noticed when you look at fog, it tends to be just above the ground a little bit and sort of floating there. It doesn't get too high, but it tends to be just slightly above. So if I'm going to come over here, let's go to like a white and drop down to about 10%. And to see if I can sort of just get this, see this little haze right here just sort of floating through. Now I got to be careful. I want to try to get it over some of the darker areas. It's like right in here would be a good area to have it. So here I put a little bit there, and I'm going to stroke that along just a little bit like that. A little bit haze here, a little bit over here, then right over here in the front. And sort of darken it up, and then just see it just goes right over those rocks and just sort of blends itself in. Same thing like right in here. Just sort of floating right above the ground. Even over here, see if I can blend in a streak of it. I'm just going to press down real hard. See what it looks like. It's not bad. Just very lightly going over some of this. Adding in some of these little details. Just create a little bit more atmosphere and mood to the piece, and they allow some of the subject matter to blend in just a little bit more, even coming across some of the sky right there too. Okay. All right, so let's just take all that, and I'm going to compress everything that we have right now into here. Let me save it first. Here we go. That way if there's something I didn't like, now I'm going to compress it and we'll look at before and after. So here's where we started. Okay, as we had just a base composition, we expanded the frame over, we added some more detail, we added indication of light, changing surfaces. So that's something that's really key for me, is that, you know, having the light coming in one direction, seeing the dark and light to some of those areas in there, establishing a little bit more mood in the foreground, pulling some of this out. Now it's a little bit harder for me to work because I am on a student's piece and it's not the way I envisioned it. So maybe Kelsey decided to go in there and work a little bit more graphically. I really wanted to define some of the form out here of that subject matter of that castle. And you know what, maybe even I did that a little too much, and that's okay. That's why I have some of that still adjusted. Like I can tone back my line layer. I can take the clouds on or off here. You know, I can control part of the haze that I put in there. And that's the benefit of going back in. Even here, if I feel like I did a little bit too much in there, I can take my eraser, go down to 10%, and just really sort of lightly come in here and adjust it. So I make those adjustments all the time at home when I'm working doing this process, is because once I develop something, if I feel like I went too far, I just come back and I erase a little bit of the layers and I get it to fit in right where I want it to be. Okay. But I think what was nice about this piece is that when we take a look at the whole thing, okay, combine the layers again and turn this on and off, is that she had some nice darks in the foreground, and by really adding a little bit more contrast and bringing out some of the rocks in here, it really creates a lot more depth, bringing us from the foreground and a trail that brings us through to finding some of these tree shapes and then bringing us back to the structure. That's a great way to sort of develop that. Okay? All right, let me go ahead and wrap it up there because I think we're at about 40 minutes, and that'll be an end to this demo. Thanks. So if this was Kelsey, if I was Kelsey, I would add some characters in here for scale. maybe in the foreground. I might have a couple in the back here. I would just keep working on it. And also, I'd be doing this. When I shrink that down, I see one of the biggest areas of contrast now is right up here through the middle. Okay, when I looked at it before, there were some battles happening here where we had some contrast here. We had this huge shadow right here. We don't know why it was there. This is missing some of there's more contrast happening on the right. So that's another great approach too, is look at the difference of before and after of when it's small, and then you can really see how the composition's feeling and developing. Okay? All right, guys, have a good one. Keep on painting.